In this week Bizline, Vietnam's recycling industry turns waste into wealth. And unlocking financing to combat the plastic crisis. Hello, you're watching Bizline on VTV International. In this week's episode, we take a closer look at the powerful link between sustainability and economic growth through the lens of Vietnam's recycling industry. Vietnam currently consumes around 3.9 million tons of plastic each year, yet only a small portion is recycled, leaving behind untapped economic value. In Vietnam, plastic waste is increasingly viewed not only as an environmental concern, but as a potential economic asset. So how can we unlock that potential? What strategies and solutions are needed to advance recycling and sustainability in the years ahead? Bizline has the answer. But first, let's take a look at the current landscape of Vietnam's recycling industry.
Plastics play a crucial role in both the global and Vietnamese economies. In Vietnam, around 3.9 million tons of plastic waste are released into the environment each year, according to a joint study by IFC and the World Bank. However, only about one-third of this waste is recycled and repurposed by businesses and facilities. It is estimated that up to 2.62 million tons of plastic are discarded annually without being recycled, equivalent to between 2.2 to 2.9 billion US dollars per year.
For 2/3 of the plastic produced becomes waste very quickly. The problem is not plastic per se, it's the plastic pollution. We want to stop this so that we can make a difference in ending plastic pollution.
Chúng ta không hành động nhanh thì đến 2050 trở đi, tức là cái lượng rác nó sẽ tương đương với lượng cá ở đại dương. Thế và nó sẽ tác động đến sức khỏe, tác động đến môi trường và tác động đến phát triển kinh tế của tất cả các nước.
Experts agree that tackling plastic pollution is a shared challenge that demands coordinated action from governments, commitment from businesses across all sectors, and responsible choices by every individual.
Vietnam is growing massively, as everyone realizes, and as growth occurs, demand for products and for as services is going to increase. But about 15 million tons of plastic are going to be produced by 2028, which is a huge amount. So it's a big responsibility on Vietnamese companies and organizations now to consider what they're developing in terms of packaging and waste, and try and make sure that the waste the packaging they develop can actually biodegrade or can be recycled in a sustainable manner.
Plastic recycling industry is at a crossroads. By strengthening its recycling value chain and shifting to a circular economy, the country can realize significant economic benefits.
We are delighted to welcome Mr. Mani Muthukumara, lead environmental economist for the Southeast Asia region at the World Bank. He joins us today to share his valuable insights on innovative strategies for unlocking the economic potential of the recycling industry. Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me here.
Now, first of all, despite its economic potential, why is the recycling rate in Vietnam so low?
There are several factors that are impacting the recycling industry in Vietnam. So let's take it one by one, right? At the end of the day, economics is about demand and supply, and it's about price. And the challenge that we are facing in Vietnam is that as long as the virgin plastics continue to be cheaper than recycled plastics, obviously the demand for virgin plastics is going to continue to increase. And also it's about preferences of consumers and also manufacturers. They somehow seems to prefer the reliability and quality of virgin plastics over recycled plastics. So that's maybe another reason why we don't see huge uptake of recycled plastics in Vietnam. The second aspect comes to the whole supply chain of how we actually do recycling in Vietnam. For example, if you take the starting point, collection, obviously much of the reliance on collection has been on waste pickers, the informal sector basically, who don't have access to the basic infrastructure of sorting, compacting, transportation. So what's happening is that because of lack of sorting, it compromises on the quality of recycled plastics, and there's a lot of leakage along the way. So as long as you continue to rely on the informal sector for collecting transportation and sorting, it also has an impact on how the recycle industry is functioning. Another major issue, because much of the processing of plastics, recycled plastics in Vietnam happens at the level of small and medium enterprises who don't have access to finance, who don't have access to modern technology. And so much of the recycling that happens is on a smaller scale. So as long as you keep the market to both for informal sector and small and medium enterprises in terms of processing, I think it's really difficult for the recycling industry to take off.
So what are the innovative solutions that can help Vietnam unlock the capital or the potential for its recycling industry, in your opinion?
First and foremost, it's important to have a formal policy and regulatory framework that can incentivize recycling. Last year, the government came up with EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, and that's a huge first step. But I think there still need to be a lot more clarity in terms of how the EPR framework will be implemented on the ground, because we still don't have clarity in terms of recycle requirement, cost sharing mechanism, accountability measures. The other biggest constraint has been financing, in the sense that it's very difficult for firms to get finance from the banking sector, financial sector, for circularity measures. For example, we see some uptake recently in the climate change space, where firms are able to get, for example, some concessional finance from the financial sector for climate change mitigation or adaptation activities. The same needs to be reflected if the firm wants to take measures on circularity in terms of plastic circularity, and that's missing. When you have EPR responsibility, you need to invest in technology, you need to invest in infrastructure. But at the end of the day, if you're a firm, you're concerned whether that's going to pay off in the long run. Obviously, there are several new instruments that are coming into play, which are being used in other countries, like plastic credits, just like carbon credits. Plastic credits have been an innovative way to actually mobilize financing for recycling. Philippines, for example, they have done an excellent job of connecting plastic credits with extended producer responsibility, where firms are able to offset some bit of their EPR responsibility through buying plastic credits. And so that generates a market for plastic credits. And then there also incentivizes companies to get in and actually start investing in projects that actually recycling projects that becomes profitable, because you can then at the end of the day sell those credits to companies that need them. So one has to look at several financing new tools that are coming to play in the plastic recycling place, globally. I think that's really important.
More importantly, what is plastic credits? Can you clarify that for us?
That's a good question. Yeah. Plastic credit is very much like what you have a carbon credit. So any entity that actually avoids or recycles a ton of plastic can get a credit, which then they can sell it to companies that actually need those credits. So that generates a kind of a market for credit, just like, for example, that's been happening in the carbon space for a long time now. Obviously, for a plastic credit market to happen, you need to have proper regulatory framework to be in place so that companies are incentivized to buy these credits. So EPR is one good way in which kind of companies are forced to kind of buy these credits, because they can offset some of their EPR responsibilities. But then it's not easy in terms of how do we get started on the plastic credits, because how do you monitor these plastic credits? Who verifies these plastic credits? There are global entities like Vera. They are able to verify how much plastic is either recycled or how much is avoided, and then they are able to avoid these credits. So and from the government side, you need to have several measures to be in place. For example, a registry to keep track of how many credits are being generated and traded in the country, a trading platform where companies can exchange these credits. You need to have proper monitoring, verification systems in place, so that then you can track these plastic credits. And also this whole concept of greenwashing, in the sense that what might happen is that if companies end up buying a lot of these plastic crates, they may not have any incentive to take any measures to recycle or change their design structure of their manufacturing units to actually do anything to do with, in terms of plastic recycling. So I think plastic crates are useful, but I think there are some limitations.
What is a plastic credit? A plastic credit represents a measurable amount of plastic that has been removed from the environment or recycled properly. For each ton of plastic waste managed, a plastic credit is issued. These credits can then be sold to companies that want to offset their own plastic footprint or meet regulatory requirements. Why does it matter? For companies, it offers a way to offset the plastic they put into the market. For NGOs and recycling projects, it provides funding and incentives to expand operations. For governments, it supports circular economy policies and extended producer responsibility (EPR) frameworks.
How are plastic credit being implemented in Vietnam and also globally? Has it been implemented at all?
Globally, the plastic credit market is growing. We have about, I think, 75,000 credits have been traded globally, which is not much compared to, let's say, the carbon market, but carbon market has been in place for a long time. As I said, a lot of this actually is happening in Asia. In the Philippines, for example, I think a major kind of player in the plastic credit market. In Vietnam, there are only a few projects in place, but most of them have to do with ocean plastics, which in terms of reducing the amount of plastic that goes into the ocean. So there are few kind of verified projects in place, but there's a huge potential. I think it all relates back to how the EPR is implemented, and if, for example, if plastic credits becomes mandatory as a part of the EPR implementation framework, it becomes a law, then obviously there's going to be huge uptake for plastic credits, and that will actually then lead to kind of a much bigger plastic credit markets in Vietnam. But still, I think we are at a very early stage because the plastic credit market is still volatile. The price is ranging from like 160 to almost $670 per ton. So it's still, I think the market is to mature.
How would plastic credit impact the progress of pollution, in your opinion?
As I said, the biggest challenge, what's stopping us from scaling up recycling is lack of financing. Obviously, we're not getting enough green financing from the banking sector for recycling projects. But one way the recycling projects can take off is actually through plastic credits, because if plastic credits are a way to make the recycling more profitable. You can actually, if you are an NGO, you can set up a project, and then if you actually manage to then sell those credits generated through the project to an entity that's to meet its EPR, say, and that becomes profitable. And so if that becomes profitable, then you'll see more and more projects taking place for generating this plastic credit. So I think it's a good financial mechanism. Once it's implemented properly, I think that can really incentivize recycling and scale up recycling in the country.
Recycling plastic waste is the program currently being implemented by this enterprise. With over 150 collection points and treatment stations across the northern region, the company successfully recycled more than 16,000 tons of plastic in 2022.
Theo cái xu hướng kinh tế tuần hoàn, kinh tế xanh hiện nay thì rác thải nhựa là một nguồn nguyên liệu rất là có giá trị, vừa góp phần bảo vệ môi trường, vừa góp phần giảm bớt khai thác các nhiên liệu hóa thạch. Vì vậy, chúng tôi kết hợp với một tập đoàn của Đức thiết kế xây dựng nhà máy quy mô lên tới 50 triệu đô la để sản xuất ra các cái hạt nhựa có tiêu chuẩn chất lượng bao bì thực phẩm.
As a pioneer in bottle-to-bottle recycling technology, this company has recycled 1.3 billion used plastic bottles into brand new ones in 2022. These recycled bottles are now being used for beverages and cosmetics.
Chúng tôi xuất khẩu 4.200 tấn sang 11 nước trong đó có những thị trường khó tính như là Hoa Kỳ và châu Âu. Với lượng rác thải nhựa thải ra môi trường mỗi năm là 1,8 triệu tấn và quy mô công suất của chúng tôi hiện nay là 30.000 tấn và sẽ nâng lên là 100.000 tấn. Thì với dung size của thị trường thì tôi nghĩ vẫn còn lớn và rất là tiềm năng.
This fast-moving consumer goods company has partnered with a recycling firm from the early stages of packaging design through to product collection and consumption. This collaboration helps address challenges in sourcing recyclable plastic and ensures consistent quality in the output of recycled products.
Chúng tôi tăng cường dùng những cái vật liệu đơn giản hơn, ít màu sắc hơn để bao bì của mình có thể dễ dàng cho nhà tái chế họ tái chế được. Thứ hai là chúng tôi tăng cường việc sử dụng nhựa tái chế trong cái bao bì của mình. Vì hiện tại là chúng tôi đã sử dụng nhựa tái chế cũng khoảng 50-70% rồi.
These initiatives reflect these companies' commitment to complying with the Extended Producer Responsibility (EPR) policy, which requires producers and importers to take responsibility for recycling a certain proportion of the products and packaging that they manufacture or import into Vietnam. Embracing EPR not only supports waste reduction and sustainable development, but also enhances product competitiveness and ensures continued access to international markets.
Many countries are really focusing on EPR as being a critical component, particularly the EU, the US, Japan. Many big countries want to make sure that EPR is fundamentally built into how products are produced. If Vietnamese companies can get on board with that, can start tracking how their products are generated, the potential waste that is created and how that will be recycled or reused, or potential management systems that they will take on board, they will see a market open up to them in these countries. The US, the EU, Japan, etc. will welcome products from Vietnam when they can see a trail of how these products have been generated and how they will be dealt with in the future. So it really is, it's a new market opportunity for Vietnam.
Compliance with EPR regulations is expected to gradually pave the way for the development of a recycling industry in Vietnam, a sector with great potential that is increasingly attracting the interest of foreign enterprises.
As many export markets, major key export markets of Vietnam demand more eco-friendly products, how can the EPR regulation boost competitiveness and also improve global access for Vietnamese products to these export markets?
Economic growth in Vietnam relies a lot on exports. For Vietnamese companies to stay globally competitive, I think it's really important they start taking measures not really in terms of products, but also in terms of packaging. Because, for example, a lot of importers now require a certain degree of recycling as a part of the packaging. And that's something that the exporters need to take care of so that they can actually stay competitive. In addition, of course, there's a huge opportunity to, for example, through EPR and other similar measures to actually make sure that the products comply with global standards. Because right now, what we are seeing in Vietnam is that we don't have proper standardization in terms of recycling measures, in terms of the quality of plastic. So unless those come into place, it's very difficult for producers to actually see what exactly are the global requirements. So if once we start building those in as a part of the EPR, extended EPR implementation, I think it will be beneficial for the Vietnamese firms, because then they can actually become more competitive globally. They can showcase that their packaging measures, their products that meet certain global standards. I think it's really important going forward. We all know that the world is moving in that direction in terms of more green consumerism, green products and services. So I think for Vietnam to stay globally competitive, they need to kind of catch up, and that's really, and plastic circularity is really an important concept in terms of integrating circular economy principles into whatever they are doing.
How can we integrate plastic credits into the EPR framework in the way that it promotes transparency and also avoid greenwashing?
I mean, we have an experience, for example, in Vietnam has a very flourishing carbon credit market for many years. So we can learn in terms of how you can avoid issues like the greenwashing. But I think as long as we make the policy and regulatory framework more transparent, obviously that will itself will make sure that companies could avoid avoid greenwashing. And also, I think it's really important also to some extent come up with local standards, because a lot of times right now we are relying a lot on external agencies like Vera and PCX to verify the plastic credits that are generated in Vietnam. But I think at the end of the day, the quality of plastics varies across countries. So I think it's really important also to, I think, for Vietnam to come up with its own standard, local standards in terms of how they verify these plastic credits. I think if they have put in place proper mechanisms and supported by policy and regulatory framework, I think plastic crediting system can play a huge role in the EPR. But one final point, I think it's really important to make sure that there are limits to how much of the plastic credits can be used in EPR. The reason being, if you allow, for example, a company to meet its EPR by buying 100% credits in the market, obviously that firm has no incentive to modify any of its production processes to become more efficient. So EPR, the intention should also be to incentivize companies to innovate, to invest in R&D so that they actually invest in technologies and skills necessary to recycling themselves.
In what ways can plastic credit contribute to balancing economic development and also environmental sustainability? And what standards or safeguards are needed to ensure the integrity of this?
I think plastic credits can play a very important role in terms of incentivizing recycling. They can lead to projects in the recycling space that are not that don't exist now. Much of the recycling in Vietnam is now confined to either informal sectors in terms of waste pickers or small and medium enterprises. But and really there needs to be scale up, especially given that we are not really recycling a whole lot of plastic in the country right now. And so the plastic credit potentially offers this opportunity to scale up recycling by bringing in more resources, but also creating more green jobs. It can create more revenue streams that can be both used by small and medium enterprises as well as by, for example, NGOs to take advantage of, so that they can actually then, we have a flourishing market in recycling.
Vietnam is actively revising its policies, mechanisms, and development models to match each stage of the country's growth. The aim is to create a closed-loop system for production, consumption, disposal, collection, and plastic recycling, which will help reduce pollution and foster a circular economy.
Chúng ta đã ban hành được một cái hệ thống chính sách pháp luật cũng khá là đầy đủ để mà giải quyết cái vấn đề ô nhiễm nhựa. Ở đây chúng ta có thể kể đến là luật bảo vệ môi trường năm 2020 đã lần đầu tiên thể chế hóa cái kinh tế tuần hoàn, quy định là phân loại rác thải tại nguồn, thu phí theo cái khối lượng rác thải phát sinh, quy định về cái trách nhiệm của nhà sản xuất phải thu hồi và tái chế nhựa. Chúng ta cũng đưa ra cái quy định về lộ trình phải giảm và loại bỏ những cái loại sản phẩm nhựa sử dụng một lần.
Now is a crucial time to reverse the global plastic pollution crisis. One key issue being actively negotiated by many countries, including Vietnam, is the creation of a legally binding international agreement to end plastic pollution.
Thế giới thì đang tiến hành đàm phán để xây dựng một thỏa thuận có tính chất ràng buộc về pháp lý giải quyết vấn đề ô nhiễm nhựa. Thì trong đó Việt Nam chúng ta cũng là một trong những quốc gia tham gia tích cực và trách nhiệm. Việt Nam đã thành lập chương trình đối tác hành động quốc gia về nhựa untapped, và chúng ta là một trong 3 quốc gia đầu tiên trên thế giới có cái chương trình này. Đến thời điểm này mà nói thì chương trình untapped của chúng ta cũng đã xác định hình được một cái dấu ấn trên bản đồ giảm ô nhiễm nhựa quốc tế.
In addition to implementing domestic management tools and fiscal measures to reduce plastic waste, the Vietnamese government has proactively called for international cooperation and action, highlighting Vietnam's commitment to joining the global effort to eliminate plastic pollution.
What role should the government, the World Bank, and also the private sector play in mobilizing finance and fostering innovation for the recycling industry in Vietnam?
The government has an important role to play. Right now, the financial sector is not prepared to lend money for plastic circularity projects. So one way the government can incentivize the financial sector is through credit guarantees, subsidies, so that incentivizes the financial sector to actually lend to these projects so that they're seen as more profitable. So if you can show that these actually could be profitable, then obviously you'll see more money flowing in. In addition, the government has to clarify the EPR responsibilities. So companies are still struggling to figure out what exactly they should be doing, whether they should invest in the environmental fund or they should undertake measures themselves. So I think greater clarity is needed from the government side in terms of EPR implementation. You have the law in place, but I think now we need to move to the implementation. Private sector, clearly I think they need to recognize, as you discussed before, that if they want to stay globally competitive, they need to actually start taking measures both in terms of plastic packaging as well as in terms of use of plastics and recycled plastics, in terms of taking measures in terms of how they manage the waste in general. So it's really important to for them to put in place a system where they're able to track their entire production and system, and that's really important because then that will help them comply with the EPR obligations. World Bank has been supporting countries on the policy space, a lot of countries, because we have done a lot of studies. We have already done 3 studies in Vietnam on plastics, and they have several recommendations that the government can directly adopt as they revise Decree 8. In addition, our sister organization, IFC, has been supporting many projects in the recycling space, and there's a huge opportunity there in terms of both identifying profitable investment opportunities.
Based on the current trend and policy development, what is the outlook for the next 5 or 10 years of Vietnam's recycling industry?
It's a huge opportunity, and we are at an inflection point, because right now the biggest challenge was there was no a framework for companies to invest in recycling, to undertake recycling or use recycled materials. But now that you have the EPR, and then you have now also some minimum standards that are coming into play in terms of what kind of plastics that you can use in the production processes, I think that's a starting point. I think that should hopefully incentivize companies and entities to actually start investing in technologies, in building their capacity to recycle. The recycling is growing, which is a good sign. And then there are several pilot projects in place. For example, companies like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Apple, and several other entities to actually develop innovative solutions. In the World Bank, we're also a part of the National Plastic Action Program, untapped, which has been very active in the plastic recycling space in terms of building awareness both among private companies, among civil societies, and so on and so forth. So I think in the next 5 years, we need to see a huge progress. A lot of things, huge agenda that needs to happen in the next 5 years, starting at the grassroots level in terms of improving sorting, improving processing, and of course, improving, incentivizing firms to invest in technology, improving financing mechanisms so that financial institutions feel more comfortable, introducing new financial instruments like plastic credits, so that then the uptake of recycling is much larger scale. So I think we have no time to waste. It's a huge opportunity. The next 5 years, I see that Vietnam can make huge strides in this space.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
As we conclude our discussion, it's evident that Vietnam's recycling industry holds immense potential for both environmental sustainability and economic advancement, with the recycling market expected to grow at a compound annual rate of 7% from 2024 to 2032, and demand increasing both domestically and internationally. Now is an ideal moment for investment and innovation. Improvements in public awareness around recycling and stronger partnerships across sectors will be key drivers of this transformation. As such, Vietnam has a golden opportunity to turn plastic waste into economic value. If fully harnessed, the recycling industry can become a cornerstone of the country's green transition and sustainable development journey. And that wraps up this edition of Bizline. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more insights into Vietnam's dynamic economy in upcoming episodes. Goodbye and see you next time.